Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 6 of State of the Division, AL West edition. My name is T. Wright. I'm alongside Kendall, McKee. We're going to bring you the latest news and notes from all the AL West action this past week. As is customary for us, we'll go over the standings for the past week. Kendall will introduce us to his new power rankings. We'll do a little team news and notes, offensive MVP, pitching MVP, card buy of the week. We've got a full slate of stuff to talk about this week, so let's go ahead and get to it. We'll start with the standings. We are starting to see a little bit of a theme here week to week, but if we run through the standings, Houston and LA both remain in the same spots. Houston is a game up on the Angels at 28 and 16. LA is right behind them at 27 and 17, and then you have the bottom three teams that are, again, continuing to be the same week in and week out. The gap is slowly widening. So Texas at 18 and 23, Seattle at 18 and 26, and Oakland at 18 and 27. So not a whole lot of change, really, now that we're starting to kind of get more into the season. The gap's widening between Houston and LA and the rest of the field. It has been each and every week. These teams are slowly falling further and further behind. Other kind of interesting tidbits from the week: Astros take 3 or 4 from Texas. I remember last show we were talking about, Texas has a chance after coming off of a great series against LA to kind of maybe get into the mix a little bit. Astros came in, took care of business there. Angels kind of continued their skid, even losing the first of the 3-game series against Oakland before riding the ship, and have kind of got a little bit of a hot streak going on. And then we have Seattle and Oakland kind of fighting for that final spot. And I kind of want to ask you, and maybe you can talk about this in your power rankings, is Seattle worse than Oakland? Like, what are we seeing there? So you go ahead and kick it off. You start with your power rankings. Give me kind of your thoughts on the past week from the AL West. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So last week, I gave the Angels the top power ranking spot, even though that the Astros had taken the division. And then I said Texas took over the the Mariners, for obvious reasons, especially in their opponents. And then the A's were rounding out the edge. And I really thought that's where this was going to stay for a while. I thought that was going to hold on there. But we've seen, so this week in my power ranks, just to run over the top 5 or the 5 real quick, and then I'll kind of dive in. I've got the Astros taking the Angels. Now they're top of the division. I've seen enough, especially when I watched those games against Texas really closely. And first off, I would like to say that Texas played fine. And I thought they were like, they didn't disgrace themselves for the most part, but they are playing the Astros. What do you expect? But I think what the Astros showed me in those games, where they are extremely competitive daily, and I think that's what you need to see from a top of the power rankings. Then you got the Angels after that, for obvious reasons. They're still 1 and 2, and I think it's really close. I think you're splitting hairs for the most part, and week by week it may be who just does better that week, or it might just be matchup based. They both played Texas last week, so and now Angels are playing them again right now. So then you've got Texas. I've still got them at number 3, because I thought this was going to be a real tight 3 and 4 for a while, and the Mariners would bump back up, and they just continue to slide. And I think that's where you're going for your question is the difference between 3 and 4 actually not as close to the difference between 4 and 5. And I don't think so. I really don't think they are competing for that last spot. I think their injuries have really taken a toll. I've said that all year. But I'll dive into it in just a second, but I think there's some hope on the horizon. The A's continue to be last. I literally gave Noisy some props last week, and he comes back with one of the worst weeks I've ever seen from him. And so I'm like, golly, and there was another guy, by the way, I don't know if you're going to go into this in MVP, LVP, that pooped on us because he was obviously listening to last week. So do you want me to dive into that stuff now, or do you want me to go into the MVP, LVP first?
You can go ahead and go into your team news and notes. That's fine.
So what I really loved about the Astros and what really plateaued them into that number, or not promoted them, and plateauing is different, into that number one position is they're 8-5 in 1-run games. And I think that shows moxie and a will to just never lose focus. And in a 162 game season, that's easy, especially if you're just rolling through opponents. And I've seen the Astros been able to hone in and really just develop some sort of cohesiveness. Their bullpen is getting better. It's still an issue, and it still needs to be put together a little bit more. But you see Abreu coming back and some things like that. They're putting some good stuff out there on the field. And obviously, Jose Altuve's had a great week. I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but when their leader emotionally is having a great week, they are going to have a great week. And so I think that was really good. And they're 14-7 against their own division opponents. So that's pretty good.
Yep.
And I like that about them. Yep. I'm thinking about an Astro that I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to save it for you because I think you're going to tee it up later. But then I'll go into the Angels really quickly. They have a 270 WRC plus. Mike Trout has a 270 WRC plus and a 350 average over the last 7 days. Yeah. I would say that's MVP worthy of the week, but I think there's a couple players that are better than him this last 7 days. Yep. So I'll be interested to see what your selection is there. Jared Walsh had 3 dingers, 4 RBIs. And Shohei was above average for most players, but for him, it wasn't like a stellar week. Yeah. Max Stassi was activated this week. So from the Angels perspective, he had a really good showing early on this season. And then last season as well. I like Max Stassi. I'm anxious to see how he brings more juice to those role players in that lineup. And I think the Angels have the chance to take back over the 1 spot next week because some of the momentum seems to be rising.
Good
Texas,
stuff.
What'd you say?
I just said good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Texas played Houston competitively. Like I said, I was happy with what I saw on the field, not only from a Rangers fan perspective, but from can this team compete for the wild card, which I hope they don't. I hope they don't compete for the wild card because I think there's a couple of things that still need to be broken down. I still think they need to trade Martin Perez. He has pitched phenomenally. He is lit. He's in the 4th spot for most of the pitching statistics. And so you're like, can you question, is he Cy Young material? And that's even crazy to even say because it's Martin Perez and it's the Rangers. Those two things together say you're getting shelled, but not recently. So I have to give him props there. I don't have long-term vibes with this Ranger team. I think it's a short-term experience, and I think they're going to break it down again in July. I think they're going to do similarly with what they did last year with shipping those guys off. The rentable guys, I'm going to ship them off for a couple of prospects and build back towards next year. Mitch Garver's back. He still has an arm issue, but he is back at the DH role and hit some tanks.
Yeah, had a good week.
And hit some tanks in the Houston series.
Yeah.
Seattle, they signed Justin Upton this week, so they are trying to fix some of that outfield role. Kyle Lewis did come back off the IL as well, and so you wanted Kelenic to step in there, and you thought maybe Kyle Lewis was going to get shipped out. Now that's different. Maybe Kyle Lewis is the guy who takes over as the guy that becomes the rookie of the year that he was and back and helps this team rise. They had a really actually good offensive last 7 days. If you look at their WRC plus, it's leading the division in terms of the whole squad. And almost every offensive statistic, they led it, or at least we're in the top 2, which says one thing: their pitching is horrendous. And so that's hard. And I think that will fix itself because they do have some guys with notable names out there and some really young guys that will have notable names. So that's why I didn't say they were going to compete for that 5th role. They are under 500 against the division opponents, though. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Like I said with the A's, Noisy, he dumped on me last week. This team is still really bad. Or he dumped on me this week from after giving him some props last week. This team is bad. They are going to continue to move veterans when we get towards the All-Star break, and it's going to get worse.
Yep, a lot worse. Good stuff. Good kind of run through of the entire division and what's going on with each team. We will now transition into our MVP. And like kind of you said, you mentioned a lot of guys had good offensive weeks, and that's absolutely true. Ty France, Jed Lowry, Tony Kemp, who got our LVP last week, turned it around.
Yeah.
Good job, Tony, another guy that listens to the show.
Noisy and him just shook hands,
Trout had a great week. Altuve, like you mentioned, but I'm going to go with a guy that I kind of attacked at the beginning. I'm going to give it to Julio Rodriguez.
Okay.
All right. So call it recency bias. I don't care what you call it. He hits his first home run in Seattle. He's gone back-to-back games with a home run. His home run in Seattle, first home run in Seattle was a beautiful oppo shot. He had 3 multi-hit games this week, 3 home runs, 7 RBI, 5 runs scored, a 219 WRC plus. Just a great week for him. And, just proud that he's bounced back from his rough start. He still struck out a lot, which again, if you were watching the show last week, I actually gave the MVP to a guy because he didn't strike out. So, but because of his other metrics offensively and just his performance, again, these past couple of games, the past couple of nights, I'm going to give it to our boy J-Rod. So congrats on your first MVP of the week award. But like you mentioned, there were a lot of guys. Altuve had a phenomenal week. His slash line was pretty incredible.
So
Trout,
if I can dive into your thinking a little bit more.
Sure.
From what I'm looking at on Fangraphs the last 7 days, Julio was 16th in WRC plus. And I'm going to disqualify maybe 5 of those due to plate appearances. So dive into how you justified putting him over Ty France, for instance, who's also on his team and had a better week.
Yeah, I looked at France's numbers. I looked at Altuve's numbers and Trout's numbers, and those were the guys that were kind of right there in it.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way. I'm just I want to walk through it with.
I'll be real honest. It was a very subjective, sentimental.
Because you put him in an LVP their week 1.
Well, not that, but he gets his first home run in Seattle.
Okay.
He's hit him in back-to-back games. A guy that I think I have an affinity for just because he's so prominent in the card world. And you're like, okay, he's finally, offensively, he looks great. I'm just I think we've also given it to Ty France before, if I can remember correctly. I'll have to go back and look at the notes, but a lot of those guys were close together. And yes, some of them had better slash lines, but I thought that J-Rod's performance all around was good enough to warrant the MVP for the week. So it's more of a, hey, let's prop up a rookie that had a great week, got his first home run in his home ballpark, and a guy that we're all excited.
That was a great home run too.
Beautiful oppo shot, right center field. So, and so it was, again, a little bit more subjective. Like there's guys that are kind of all in that same area. So just decided to go with it as a peace offering to J-Rod, because
he's listening.
He's in my DMs. He's upset. I had to throw him a bone. So
I love it.
All right. So MVP pitching wise, again, really solid outings from another number of guys. We saw guys that had some really strong performances, but I'm going to go with Martin Perez. I mean, the guy has had a phenomenal month of May, as you already have alluded to. Struck out 22, walked 7, only given up 2 earned runs the whole month, no home runs. He's averaging almost 100 pitches per outing. Then he goes out and just gives Texas all 9 innings against a great Houston team, throws a complete game shutout. Just fantastic. I mean, you got to give Perez his props. The guy has been just phenomenal, again, this entire month, as you kind of already alluded to. So I'm giving the MVP to Martin Perez. So Syndergaard had a great night last night, I think it was, going 8 strong. It's his longest outing of the season. So don't want to discredit that. It was a great performance as well. But I mean, a 9-inning shutout against Houston. Come on, it's a no-brainer. So
I think one of the most impressive things about that shutout was that at the end, it was getting really dicey and he was clearly losing it, and then Woodward comes out there. You think he's going to make the pitching change, and he comes out there and you can verbally see him tell Martin, this is you. Yeah. This is you. And I first off, I love that when the manager goes out not the pitching coach, and then pumps up the guy. And he's like, this is your ball game. Go win it or go lose it. And it was a close game. And there was runners on, and he was like, he didn't have his stuff like he did early in the game. And he just knuckles down and wins the ball game. And I was like, that's GOAT material in terms of for the week.
Love to see it. LVP for the offense this week. Kind of unreal, but it has to go to our offensive MVP of last week, Yuli Gurriel. The guy had a terrible week. Goes 1 for 19, has a WRC plus of -64. Didn't even draw a walk all week long. I mean, that's not exactly what you want out of your 5-hole hitter.
Right.
So again, the guy had a great week last week, but baseball is a very weird game, and Guriel had a tanker of a week. So I'm sorry, Yuli, but I mean, we cannot let this go unnoticed.
We prop you up and then you just dump on us.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So, not hats off to you. You were terrible this week, and we would like a formal apology. So anyway, LVP of the pitching, it's kind of, this is probably my least favorite category, because you got a guy that has one start. Every pitcher is going to have a bad start in a week. It's a little kind of unfair to look at pitching performances week to week, but Zach Logue of Oakland had a really rough outing against Seattle. He was the one that gave up the home run to J-Rod. He went 4 2/3, gave up 7. But in the same kind of vein, Marco Gonzalez, same game, gave up 5, went 5 1/3, gave up 5 runs. James Caprillion had a pretty crappy outing the next night. He went, he gave up 5 runs as well. So it's not, I'm not picking on Logue just because he gave up the most runs, but I mean, what do? You've got guys that are going to come out and have bad weeks, bad starts in a given week. And doesn't really mean that they're terrible pitchers, but Zach Logue of Oakland, you gave up 7. I mean, so I'm sorry, man, but you got to do better. So that's our LVP for the week. So that wraps up MVP and LVP discussion, and let's go into our
in reference to the LVP. When I was doing the power rankings and I was talking about the Mariners having the best offensive numbers in the division, I also had to weigh like these dudes torched some A's pitching.
Right.
And so like, it's great. You torched 7 days in a row, but you also played Oakland and you took care of the guys you're supposed to not pitch well. So anyway.
Yeah. All right. So let's go with card by the week. I think you got a couple good ones for us. Tell us what you got.
Yeah, I have 2 for the week. I have one that's kind of in a longer play threshold, maybe a really buy low opportunity. I like searching these kind of things on YouTube. It's like best $5 auto you can buy or something like that. And this was a guy that I did that on and bought a $5 auto of him in December. So obviously, he's going to be a longer play guy, very low name recognition. But Jordan Davis from the A's, he's a corner guy from the A's, and he's hitting really, really well since his promotion to Double-A. So if we look at his promotion to Double-A, he's been slash line of 330, 381, 649 with 6 homers and an 11.4 strikeout percentage. And I think that last part is a very, very key aspect, because he's a guy that is going into Double-A, which, as we've talked about a lot, is that really big hitter threshold of like, can these guys step into advanced secondary and secondary pitches? Can they evolve into that? Or are they just beaming fastballs like nobody's business? And we're seeing an 11.4% strikeout percentage from him in that Double-A. So I really like that. Plus his cards, the recent sales are $15. I bought it for $5 in December. So that's tripling the value. I like that. If he triples again, we're going to see some real stinking awesome numbers. And I think he does get the opportunity to come up at some point this year with Oakland. And I think you'll see a price pop at that point, especially if he comes up and does anything in Oakland. So I think it's a buy low opportunity for Jordan Diaz, first, third, and his autos are around $10 to $15. Get in if you can. The guy that's a little more expensive, but I definitely think is going to pop with the aspect of a call up, is Ezekiel Duran. Like, this is a guy that we got, that Texas got in a trade for Joey Gallo that I was really upset about at the time. We were on the train to the Cubs game when the trade went out. I don't know if you remember this, but I was distraught.
Yep.
Like, the worst. I just felt like we got just shafted. And now on this side of it, I'm like, wow, we did great because look what Joey's doing in New York. But Ezekiel Duran is a guy that's come over. He also is on a roll at AA. And I think that's another thing. Like, AA is that level of like, can you make it? And he's hitting 327, 376, 622, 6 home runs, 22 RBIs in 24 games. So he's almost got an RBI a game, which is pretty serious. And 25 extra base hits as well. He's on a roll. He's an excellent player, and he's going to get a call up soon from the Rangers. I think they need something like that. I'm beginning to see like they're realizing that some of those guys that they have up there are not quite what they thought they would be coming out of spring training. And Josh Smith, who we've already talked about, and Ezekiel Duran are going to get a call up soon, and they're going to get a chance to play. And Duran is a little more expensive though. He's an $89 auto right now. And that's probably because he was in that, I believe he was in the 2020 set. Yeah, he was in that 2020 Yankees set. So, it was an expensive get because you had to pay for, if you're paying for break slots, they were Dominguez, Volpe, and then Duran, so likely, if you had the Yankees and you were looking for those two guys, you probably have some Duran cards that are probably about to be valuable as well. So,
good stuff.
That's
I'm
great.
not
sure if it's the same value in terms of guys in his range, but I would say those are my two.
Little prospect talk, little card talk. If you're into cards at all, you can catch us on Cardboard Consultants with the wonderful Aram Layton. So I'm sure you know that name, but we love to talk cards and love to talk prospects. So, that wraps up our show, week 6 or episode 6, State of the Division, AL West edition. We will be back next week to detail all of the happenings in this division. We have gotten some pretty good separation. I think it's 9, 10, and 10.5 games back for those bottom 3. So shaping up to be an LA Houston battle. Hopefully they both get in the playoffs, but we'll see what happens there. So that's all we got for this week. I'm T. Wright with my co-host Kendall McKee signing off, and we will see you guys next week.